The silence in the boardroom didn't feel like silence at all. It felt like pressure, thick and visible, pressing against my ribs until the breath in my chest turned sharp. My name is Akash, and before that room full of 70 employees, my own father suspended me like I was some intern who'd spilled coffee on the server, stood there frozen for half a second, laser pointer still in my hand. The third slide glowing behind me, my slide, my work. 17 years of building this company brick by brick, and somehow I was the one being treated like the problem. Across the table, my father, Richard Maddox, didn't even lift his eyes fully. He said it like he was asking someone to pass the salt. You're suspended. No emotion, no explanation, just a verdict. A few people shifted in their chairs. The scraping sound echoed around the glass room. Everyone else stared down at their notepads like their lives depended on it. Not one person looked at me, not even the ones I'd hired myself, trained myself, promoted myself. The quiet wasn't disagreement, it was survival. Beside my father, my older brother, Grayson, leaned back in his chair, slow and satisfied, the kind of smile that doesn't show teeth, just ego. Like a kid who finally got the toy he always broke just so I couldn't have it. Then came the line I'll never forget. Until you make a public apology to your brother. There it was. The real reason, not performance, not misconduct, not a business decision, just family politics. Dressed in a suit and tie. Felt my jaw lock. I felt the weight of the room watching without watching. I felt something inside me, the part that kept forgiving, kept believing, kept trying, finally, quietly snap. But outside, nothing. No anger, no protest, no panic, just a slow breath. Not, all right, 2 words, calm, controlled, measured like a surgeon, preparing for an incision. Father blinked, as if he expected me to crumble or beg or turn into a child again. But I just clicked the presentation remote once, ending the slideshow like the meeting was simply over. I placed it gently on the table. Then I walked out. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady, like the ground wasn't shifting beneath me, like the air wasn't cutting into my lungs, like I hadn't just been erased in front of the only world I'd known for most of my life. Because here's the thing. He thought he was ending something. What he didn't know was that I wasn't walking away empty-handed. The elevator doors closed. My reflection stared back at me, tie straight, face unreadable. Heartbeat steady, keep steady. The words I'd lived by, the ones printed on my old Navy mug, echoed in my head. Except this time the meaning had changed. It wasn't a reminder anymore. It was a warning. To them. The boardroom floor disappeared as the elevator descended. One clean, quiet level at a time. By the time I reached the lobby, something new had settled inside my chest. Cold, sharp, purposeful. If my father wanted to embarrass me publicly, I could return the lesson privately. If he wanted to play power games, he'd forgotten who built the playbook. If he wanted war, he had just declared it. And as I walked out of Maddox Systems that morning, people looking up from their desks with confusion or pity or fear, I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Because by the next morning, when he smirked and asked if I'd learned my lesson, he would walk into his office and find my desk empty, my badge gone, and my resignation letter sitting on top, and that would only be the beginning. Before I continue, tell. From which place are you watching this story right now? Please subscribe and like the video for motivation. I didn't go home after leaving. Maddox Systems home felt too small for the size of the shift happening inside me. Instead, I drove, no destination, no plan, just the road, the hum of the engine, and 17 years of loyalty burning off me like steam. By the time the sun dipped behind the Austin skyline, I found myself parked outside a place I hadn't visited in months, the warehouse district, where Maddox Systems stored everything old, forgotten, or inconvenient. Funny how often that included people too. Kept the engine running, staring at the wide steel building, the security lights casting a pale glow across the loading docks. I knew this place better than anyone. I was the one who redesigned the entire inventory system, the one who caught $1 million shrinkage issue before it buried the company. My father never said thank you. He didn't need to. The company's silence had always spoken. Louder, I got out of the car and unlocked the side door with a badge. I technically should have surrendered already, but I hadn't, not yet. I knew exactly when to hand that badge back. Inside, the air was cold, metallic, and full of memories. I walked straight to storage section C12, the place where inactive archives lived. Not paper files, those were digital now. I was here for something far more important. The founder's box. Dented black case my father made years ago, back when the company was just him, me, and 2 engineers working from a converted garage. He didn't know I kept the original. He thought he'd thrown it away after the company scaled. But he didn't know everything. Not then, not now. I dragged the box out, brushed dust off the surface, and opened it. Inside lay 3 things. Yellowed contract with my signature from 17 years ago. Contract my father made me sign at 23. Back when I thought he was a titan I should be proud to follow. It tied me to the company. Indefinitely, but it also tied the company to me in ways he never read carefully. A USB drive. The original procurement automation algorithm I built before Matic Systems even had an R&D department. I wrote this code alone at 2 a.m. in that garage. My father insisted it belonged to the company. He was wrong, and ownership ledger one my father forgot. Existed one that legally listed me as holding a percentage of stock. He'd later pretended never existed. Small, yes, but not insignificant. Small enough to ignore, big enough to destroy him. I closed the box and carried it to the car like it weighed. Nothing, because the weight wasn't the metal. It was the truth inside it. Back in the driver's seat, I let the engine idle and stared out at the empty lot. For years I'd told myself loyalty was love. That sacrifice was respect. That family was something you stayed in even when the doors slammed in your face. But the box sitting on the passenger seat wasn't just history. It was leverage. It was proof. It was mine. And for the first time in 17 years, I realized something simple but terrifying. My father had never suspended me. Not really. He had freed me. I drove home with a calmness that felt almost unnatural. I slept for the first time in months without waking up with spreadsheets in my head. And when dawn finally cracked over the city, gold bleeding into the blinds of my apartment, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I got up, showered, dressed, picked up my phone, and called the one person who my father listened to without question. Attorney Michael Devereux, my father's personal lawyer for 22 years, except this time, he wasn't calling for my father. He was calling for me. I didn't say much on the call. Just, Michael, I need you to review something, quietly and quickly. I think you'll want to see this. He hesitated. Does your father know? No, I said. And he won't. Not until you do. The silence that followed was heavy. Loaded, then send it. I emailed scans of everything, the contract, the ledger, the rights to the algorithm, all of it. 6 minutes later, Michael called back. His voice wasn't calm anymore. Akash, where did you get these? They've always been mine, I said. I just stopped pretending they weren't. There was another long silence. Then the sound of realization, pure, cold, devastating realization. Your father, he whispered, has no idea these still exist. No, I said softly. He doesn't. And if I were him, he exhaled slowly, incredulous. I'd be terrified. Looked at the founder's box beside me and felt something settle, because now it had begun. Morning came with a strange stillness, the kind of quiet that doesn't settle around you. It settles inside you. 7:14 a.m. I was already dressed, already steady, already certain of the one thing I'd never been certain of before. I didn't belong to Matic Systems anymore, and Matic Systems no longer controlled me. I drove to the office one last time, not out of sentiment, but out of precision. You only walk away clean when you control your exit. The Matic Systems parking lot buzzed with the usual Tuesday energy, employees with travel mugs, ID badges bouncing against lanyards, small talk about deadlines and weekend plans. Nobody knew a tectonic shift was hiding inside the building, waiting to split the floor open. I walked through the front doors. The receptionist blinked in. Surprise. Good morning, Akash. She paused. I thought you weren't coming in today. I won't be here long, I said with a calm smile. That was all. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt different this time. Not heavier, lighter. Like the weight I'd carried for 17 years had finally realized it. Didn't own me. When the doors opened, the energy on the executive floor shifted. Heads turned. Conversations paused. People pretended they weren't looking, but they were. Word traveled faster in a corporate building than oxygen. My desk sat exactly where I'd left it the day before. Except now it looked like a crime scene waiting for detectives. Papers neatly stacked. Screens dark, my nameplate still. Polished like nothing had happened. I pulled open the drawer and removed the 3 things I cared about. My Navy mug, my notebook from my first year at the company, the photo of me and my mother taken on the day. Maddox Systems launched everything else. They could keep it was never mine anyway. Placed my company badge on the desk, the lanyard curled slightly, like it didn't know it was being abandoned. Then I set down the envelope, the resignation letter. Michael had helped me word to precise surgical perfection. Not angry, not emotional, just factual and devastating as I sealed the envelope. Someone stepped into the doorway. It was Sarah, head of HR, a woman who'd seen more corporate battles than anyone else in the building. She didn't walk in. She didn't smile. She just looked at me for a long, quiet moment. They shouldn't have done it. Like that, she said. Finally, they did it exactly how they meant to, I replied. She swallowed. You know this place isn't the same without you. It'll survive, I said. It just won't be mine. Then she glanced at the envelope. Will this make things worse? I met her eyes. No, I said softly. It will make them truthful. She nodded once, stepped back, and didn't say another word. I picked up the founder's box, tucked under my arm like a briefcase full of ghosts, and walked past the boardroom where everything had unraveled just 24 hours earlier. From inside, I could hear my father's voice, loud, confident, instructing the team on next quarter priorities. As if nothing had happened, as if I had been a moment, not a son. Grayson's laughter followed, sharp and familiar. The kind of laughter he used when he felt untouchable. Good. Let them feel untouchable. For a few more minutes, I walked down the hallway. Each step measured, steady, no hesitation, no backward glance. The elevator opened for me like it knew this was the last time. When I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed. A text from Michael, my father's lawyer, the man who'd spent decades protecting Richard Maddox from every mistake, every oversight, every ego-driven error. Michael, reviewed everything. Meeting scheduled. 3 p.m. today, Richard. Must attend. Board will be present. He doesn't know why yet. B. Ready? I stared at the screen. PM, that was when my father's day and his certainty would break in half. I stepped out into the sunlight. Austin felt different, brighter, sharper, like the city itself knew something was coming. Opened my car door, set the box on the passenger seat, and slid in. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Michael. One more thing, what you're holding, it's bigger than you think. By the time your father finishes reading the first page, he'll understand exactly what he's done and what he's lost. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I started the car, pulled out of the lot, and drove away, not from the company, but toward the place where the truth would finally be unboxed, toward the meeting that would make my father pale, toward the reckoning he created, toward the end he never saw. Coming, I didn't go home before the meeting. Home felt too small for what I was about to walk into. Instead, I drove to a quiet cafe near the river, one of those forgotten places where no one from the corporate world ever came, the kind of place where time slowed down, enough to hear your own breathing. Sat in the corner booth, with the founder's box in front of me, the black metal catching faint streaks of afternoon light. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Everything inside had already reshaped the ground beneath my father's feet. At 2:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. Michael, board is assembling. They believe it's a compliance update. Richard is irritated. You weren't here this morning. Grayson is mocking you openly. This will be interesting, I smirked. Not cruelly, just knowingly. 17 years of being underestimated had prepared me well for this moment. By 2:53 p.m., I pulled into the underground executive garage of Maddox Systems, the place I used to enter with pride and left yesterday with humiliation. Today I walked with neither. I walked with purpose. The elevator hummed as it climbed. 15th floor. The doors opened, and there it was. A long hallway lined with glass offices, and at the far end, the executive boardroom, the same one where I was suspended. But the energy today was different, serious, uneasy. Something electric buzzed in the air like the building itself knew what was coming, too. Board members whispered near the door. They stopped when they saw me. Akash, one of them said, straightening. We didn't expect— You will, I said calmly. In about 3 minutes, inside the boardroom, my father sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, jaw set, confidence radiating off him like heat. Grayson lounged beside him, legs stretched out, fingers tapping on his phone, smirking before he even looked up. The rest of the board murmured quietly, glancing at folders placed neatly in front of each chair. Michael stood near the projector, tie loosened, expression unreadable. My father finally looked at me. Akash, he said with that practiced disappointment he'd perfected over the years. This is a compliance briefing. Your presence isn't required. You're suspended in case you forgot. I stepped forward. No, I said. You're going to want me here. A ripple went through the room. My father leaned back slowly, irritation shifting into something closer to curiosity. Is that so? Michael cleared his throat. We should begin. My father gestured dismissively. Fine, let's get this over with. Michael didn't start with a slide. He didn't start with a speech. He started with a question. Richard, he said, voice even. Do you recall the original founder's contract you drafted with Akash 17 years ago? My father waved a hand. It was replaced years ago when we formalized ownership. All of that is irrelevant. Michael picked up the document, the yellowed contract. I'd emailed him. Actually, he said, it is very relevant, because you never formally voided it. My father frowned. Of course I did. You didn't, Michael said gently. Because you never filed it. A board member leaned forward. What does that mean? Michael looked directly at my father. It means the original terms still stand, legally. My father's jaw tightened. What terms? Michael opened the contract, slid it across the table, and tapped the paragraph. My father should have read more carefully. 17 years ago. Clause 3B, Michael said. Any original intellectual property created by Akash prior to organizational incorporation remains solely his unless a separate transfer agreement was executed. My father blinked. That's ridiculous. Everything he made belonged to the company. Michael shook his head slowly. That would be true if you had a signed transfer agreement, but you don't, and therefore, he turned the document around for the entire board to see. The procurement, automation algorithm, the foundational system Maddox Systems built its entire supply chain on, does not legally belong to Maddox Systems. There it was. The first crack in my father's expression. He laughed once, short, incredulous. This is absurd. The company has been using that system for over a decade, and using it without owning it. Michael replied, is a breach. The board erupted into whispers. Grayson stopped, smirking. I stood still, silent, steady. Father stared at Michael, voice shaking with anger. You're telling me my own son is threatening to sue me? I'm not telling you anything, Michael said. I'm explaining what the documents show. He opened the next file, the ownership ledger, and this, he continued, is even more serious. My father narrowed his eyes. What now? Michael's tone softened. Richard, the ledger shows Akash holds a 5% founder's stake. You never removed it. You never amended it. You never transferred it. You simply forgot it existed. Gasps broke around the table. 5%. 5% was small in conversation. But legally? In a family business? It was a grenade. My father's face lost a shade of color. Not white yet, but close. Richard, one board member said quietly. Is this true? My father didn't answer. He couldn't, because the room already knew this wasn't the moment. He turned pale. That moment was coming. Michael cleared his throat and looked around the table. There's something else, he said. And this is the part you all need to see. He clicked the projector. One document appeared on the screen. A breach. Letter, drafted, ready, my signature at the bottom. The room went dead. Silent. Michael looked at my father. If Akash files this, he said softly, Maddox Systems will be legally barred from using its procurement systems until ownership is resolved. That means halting operations. That means freezing contracts. That means notifying investors. My father's face drained another shade, this time visibly. Grayson sat up straight, panic flickering across his face, and I finally spoke, looking at them both. Yesterday, I said quietly, you suspended me to humiliate me. I stepped closer. Today, You get to understand what humiliation feels like when it's backed by the law. My father's lips parted. No sound came out. He wasn't angry anymore. He was afraid. For a long moment, no one in the boardroom moved. The air changed, thicker, heavier, as if the entire building inhaled and held its breath. Father's eyes stayed glued to the breach letter, projected behind Michael, the glowing legal text reflecting off the glass table. His fingertips trembled once before he hid his hands under the table. Grayson, usually all swagger and noise, was suddenly very still. His phone sat forgotten in front of him. I pulled out a chair slowly, deliberately, and took a seat, not at the far end of the table, not in the corner, not as a spectator. I sat in the seat I'd taken for 17 years, and from my father's left, a spot someone else had been warming yesterday. No one protested, no one dared. Michael continued, voice calm but razor sharp. If this breach is filed, he said, every vendor using the Maddox procurement system will need to halt operations. They'll request alternative infrastructure. 1. The company doesn't have ready. Contracts would collapse. Investor confidence would plummet. The board would be legally obligated to respond. My father finally found his voice, though it cracked at the edges. Michael, you've been my attorney for 2 decades. You can't possibly be siding with the truth? Michael cut in gently. With the correct legally binding documentation? With the founder whose rights were ignored? He shook his head once. I am not your personal shield today, Richard. I am the company's legal counsel. And the company has a critical problem. A board member? Ms. Davenport Finance leaned forward. Akash, she said carefully. What exactly do you want? The room turned toward me. I didn't rush. Didn't raise my voice. I folded my hands on the table and spoke with the same steady tone I'd used walking into my first board meeting years ago. I want the truth acknowledged, I said. Nothing more. Nothing less. My father's voice rose, desperate. You're doing this because I suspended you. Because you refused to apologize to your brother for your behavior. I turned to him slowly. My behavior? I let the question simmer. Tell them what actually happened. Dad, tell them why. You wanted that apology. He stiffened, but the board waited. Looked at Grayson next. Tell them why. You wanted me gone. Yesterday, his jaw tightened. This is ridiculous. Is it? I asked. Or are you finally realizing the room isn't tilted in your favor anymore? My father slammed his palm on the table. Enough. Michael held up a hand. Richard, 1. Word sharp enough to silence him. The boardroom fell quiet again. I leaned back, my voice calm. 2 weeks ago, Grayson approved a vendor contract without reviewing the audit flags. A contract that would have cost Maddox Systems over $8 million in the first year alone. Few board members gasped. Grayson blamed procurement, I continued, and procurement blamed my team. But the logs were clear. He authorized it alone against internal policy. Grayson's face drained instantly. You're lying. I'm not, I said. And your digital signature proves it. Michael nodded. I've reviewed the logs. They're accurate. The board members exchanged glances, sharp, troubled, furious. I kept going. When I confronted him privately, calmly he exploded. He claimed nepotism protected him. He said I'd never outrank him, because I wasn't the real legacy. So he insulted my mother. Repeatedly, the room froze, even. Michael looked stunned. He hadn't known that part, and when I defended myself, I said quietly, my father didn't ask what happened. He didn't look at evidence. He didn't even ask why the argument started. I exhaled slowly. He simply ordered me to apologize to Grayson, publicly, to save face. My father's voice broke. Akash! I didn't mean, yes, I said softly. Cutting him off, you did. The board watched him like a man standing on a cracking ledge. And yesterday, I added, you suspended me in front of 70 employees, not because of company policy, not because of leadership structure, but because I refused to let my brother insult me again. My father swallowed hard. The room was silent. Miss Davenport spoke again, voice controlled. So what do you want now, Akash? I took a breath. I want accountability, not revenge. She nodded. Define it. I lifted my gaze, meeting every board member's eye. First, I said, the suspension is rescinded and removed from record. One board member scribbled notes. Second, the founder's contract is formalized properly, retroactively so. The company can legally retain the algorithm. I waive rights to pursue breach actions, provided new terms are written. Michael raised his brows slightly. A fair offer. A strategic one. Third, I said, voice tightening slightly. Grayson steps down from any role involving financial authorization. Effective today, Grayson shot to his feet. Absolutely not. Sit, my father whispered. Voice frail, Grayson froze. And finally, I added quietly, my position in the company is no longer subject to family dynamics. Performance only. Respect only, the board murmured. Michael folded his hands. Thinking, my father stared at me, eyes watery, not from sadness, from shock, from the realization that the son he underestimated had walked into the room with facts, proof, and quiet power. Then Ms. Davenport spoke. Akash, your conditions are reasonable. My father whipped his head toward her. Reasonable?
He's trying to take the company from me.
No, she said. Calmly, he's trying to save it. My father went quiet, because he knew she was right, and for the first time since I'd known him. He looked small. The sun had barely risen. When I pulled into the private drive of the Maddox Systems legal wing, a building most employees never even stepped foot inside. I'd been here countless times, usually to review partnership contracts or compliance issues. But today, walking through those tinted glass doors felt different. Like I wasn't just stepping into a department. I was stepping into the part of the company my father never wanted me to control. Elaine's heels clicked beside me as we moved down the hallway. Your father thinks you're meeting with an external auditor, she said quietly. He has no idea this meeting even exists. Good, I replied. He doesn't get to control every door in this company anymore. We turned into conference room. 4C lights dim. File boxes open. A projector already humming softly, and 3 people stood waiting for me. 2 legal analysts and a forensic accountant whose expression alone told me she'd found something ugly. Morning. Akash, the accountant said. We pulled everything you flagged. And, well, you should sit. I didn't sit. Show me. She clicked the remote. The first spreadsheet filled the screen. Clean, professional, color-coded. This is your division, she said. Everything tracks. In fact, you've been generating a higher net margin than the CFO previously reported. I nodded. I knew my numbers were solid. Then she clicked again. The second spreadsheet hit the screen. Grayson's division, 9.4 million unaccounted for vendor payouts that didn't match delivered. Product, inflated invoices from Shell, companies that traced back to a single P.O. box in Round Rock. This is fraud, I said quietly. She nodded. 18 months worth. And Dad signed off on all these approvals? Every one of them. I clenched my jaw, suspended me publicly because I wouldn't apologize, while he'd been signing his name on money that was disappearing through his favorite son's hands. Elaine stepped forward, sliding a thick folder into my hand. This, she said softly, is the part he didn't expect anyone to see. Grayson wasn't stealing alone. My stomach sank. What do you mean? She pointed to the authorization logs. The CFO knew. Accounting flagged irregularities last quarter, and he suppressed the audit. Your father intervened, personally, to shut it down. I felt the room tilt for half a second. My father, the man who lectured us about legacy, integrity, and doing things the Maddox way, and had been protecting Grayson while letting me carry the weight of the company's toughest divisions. One of the analysts cleared his throat gently. This is enough for a full federal investigation, and given your position, Akash, you stand completely clear of wrongdoing. He looked me directly in the eyes. But your father and brother? They won't walk away from this without consequences. A long, slow breath left my lungs. So, what happens next? Elaine closed the folder for me. That depends on how far you want this to go. You can expose them. You can let the board see everything. You can force a vote. You can take control. She paused. Or you can burn everything they built. Didn't answer at first because the truth was I wasn't sure what I wanted more. Retribution, justice, or a clean break from the people who'd spent years pretending I was disposable. But I knew one thing for certain. Dad thought publicly. Humiliating me had ended the story. He had absolutely no idea. It was the opening scene. I closed the folder and looked at Elaine. Prepare everything. Every file, every signature, every name involved. And after that? She asked. I straightened. a calm fury settling into my bones. After that, I said, we finished what they started. The boardroom smelled of polished wood and old money, the kind of place where decisions were made decades before the consequences arrived. But today, for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't walking into that room as the obedient son or the overlooked second choice. I walked in as the man holding the truth. Every board member was already seated. 16 faces, some curious, some nervous, some pretending they weren't. Waiting for the explosion, Dad sat at the head of the table, suit sharp, chin lifted, confidence oozing from him like cologne. Grayson lounged beside him, scrolling casually on his phone like none of this mattered. As I stepped inside, the room quieted. Dad didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just narrowed his eyes. Akash, he said, you weren't invited to this meeting. I know, I replied, placing a heavy binder on the table. That's why I scheduled it. Few board members exchanged glances. Dad leaned back, voice icy. You no longer have authority here. Actually, I said, opening the binder, I have more authority than you. Think. I clicked the remote. The screen behind me lit up with the first slide. Not numbers, not projections, but authorization logs. Dad's expression didn't change. Grayson's phone slipped, slightly in his hand. Over the last 18 months, I began, my voice steady. Maddox Systems has lost nearly $9.4 million to fraudulent vendors. A ripple moved through the room, continued. These shell companies lead back to a P.O. box in Round Rock, Texas, the same P.O. box registered under the name of one of Grayson's LLCs. Grayson shot up from his chair. That's not Akash. What the hell are you talking about? I raised a second slide. Invoices, payouts, timestamps, signatures. Dad, yes. Signatures, board member. Patel lifted his glasses. Richard, is this accurate? Dad didn't move. Grayson sputtered. This is a setup. It's not, Elaine said from the doorway. Every head turned. She stepped forward, her voice crisp and professional. All of these documents were verified by internal audit and third-party accountants. Independent, unbiased, thorough. Grayson turned pale. Dad finally spoke. You think you can walk in here and undermine me? No, I said quietly. I'm doing what you should have done. Protecting this company. Slid a smaller envelope across the table. And here is the full recorded transcript of last quarter's audit request. The one accounting tried to initiate. The one you personally shut down. Dad's jaw tightened. He didn't reach for it. Patel inhaled. Sharply, another board member scribbled something fast. Someone whispered, this is bad. I stepped back, hands steady. So here's what happens next, I said. You both step down, today, effective. Immediately, Dad bolted upright. You don't have the power to remove me. A slow, cold smile touched my lips, maybe not on my own. I looked around the table, but with a unanimous board vote? Very possible. Silence. Then Patel spoke, voice firm. I moved to suspend. Richard and Grayson Maddox pending external investigation. Another voice followed. Then another, and another. Hands rose one by one. 14 votes, then 15, then all. 16. Unanimous. Dad's face drained of color. Grayson dropped back into his chair like someone had pulled the air out of him. I didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't revel, because this wasn't a victory. This was justice, delayed, but delivered. The board dismissed them. Security escorted them out. Stood alone for a moment. Breathing in the quiet, Patel approached me. Akash, he said. For the record, would you consider taking interim control? I looked out at the city skyline. Sun rising and slicing through the glass. Not interim. I said, permanent. He nodded once. Firmly. Then welcome home. I gathered my binder, my notes, and the weight I'd carried for years. And as I stepped out of that boardroom, one truth settled deep in my bones. My father suspended me to humiliate me. My brother tried to bury me, but they forgot something. You can't erase the man who built the foundation you're standing on.